Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Advantage series, where we discuss pressing matters in digital advertising with industry and group experts. We're currently exploring data governance and ethics, and in the previous session, I was joined by two great minds from GroupM, Nicola McCormick, our Global Legal Counsel, and Nikki Duran, our Global Privacy Program Director. In that session, we spoke about what a data governance strategy consists of, how it affects consumers, and whether brands are taking this topic seriously enough. There are some interesting outtakes on key areas of focus for clients, along with common mistakes and the major barriers that exist. In this session, we're going to explore data quality, a topic which came up quite a bit in our identity series. Salesforce, who spoke on episode 2, suggested that it's probably better to start from scratch and build a solid first-party data strategy than to use bad data at all. There are huge benefits to using quality data. It enables advertisers to personalize content and have more meaningful interaction with customers. It enables excellence in service and personalization, which will last in the minds of the consumer, even if it's a small touch like placing their favorite chocolate bar in a hotel room before arrival. However, these positive aspects of data have been overshadowed by the issues that surround data privacy and consumer trust, which is a direct result of using bad data. Imagine if you have a major disagreement with a service provider and their next interaction with you is to serve an ad with an offer to spend more of your hard-earned cash. This is not a good use of data and likely a use of bad data, and it would likely have more of a negative effect to last a lot longer than the positives ever could. To explore this topic further, we're privileged to be speaking with Zuzana Urbanova, APAC Head of Data Solutions at Lotame, and Dominic Benton, our APAC Data and Platform Strategy Lead from GroupM's Global Data and Tech team. You may well have read a lot of news about Lotame recently, especially with the work they're doing around unified ID space. I can't think of a better pair of individuals to have discussed this topic with us. So welcome, Zuzana and Dom. Thank you very, very much for joining us. As a start, Zuzana, can we kick off with you and just have a quick introduction from yourself?
Of course. Thanks, Chris, for the intro. So for those who are not familiar with Lotame, we are the world's largest data provider of data and data-driven solutions. So we work very closely with clients and agencies across their data solutions in this region, especially.
Perfect. Thanks for joining us. And then Dom, you're a well-known face around the office, so do you want to just give a quick intro?
Yep, sure. So thank you for the introduction, Chris. My name is Dom and part of the global data and technology team. My role, my remit for data strategy covers anything from data partnerships to data governance, data ethics, and how we engage with all of the vendors and partners at GroupM.
Excellent. Thanks for coming on board, mate. So let's kick off. Data quality. This is something which has come up a couple of times on the previous session in identity. It's something we're asked about a lot from our clients, and certainly internally, we're always asked questions in terms of where does data come from? What makes it good quality data? How is it collected? And really what makes up the segments which are involved in it? So Zuzana, if I can ask you from the outset, from your point of view in Lotame, what is the definition of quality data? Is that quantity, accuracy, recency, or the source? And is there a right balance for that data as well?
I think, Chris, you might be quite surprised, but there is actually no standard definition of data quality. So whatever the data quality means to myself, it might mean completely different thing to you. So data quality means different things to different stakeholders. So your tolerance to certain factors like recency or accuracy might vary by campaign objectives, for example, or the nature of your clients. But I think that being said, transparency is the most critical factor in kind of creating your own definition of data quality. So what do I mean by data transparency? So I think especially when you look at the likes of marketers, they definitely must demand the transparency around the who, how, when, and where the data has been collected or the segments has been built. So for the sake of this conversation, let's, I'd say, focus on the audience segments transparency. So there are kind of 4 key components that we need to be bearing in mind. And there's so many different questions that the agency should be asking data providers across each of these sections. But I've got a few examples as to the type of questions that we should be asking when it comes to data transparency. So first one is all around the type of the segments that you will be accessing. So the questions you should be asking is what type of data this is. Is this behavioral data, intent data? if it is custom segments, what type of data has been used within the custom segments itself? The second question is all around the source of the data. So it's very important to understand that if we are using the third-party data or second-party data, if it is second-party data, do we need to establish a relationship with the entity that is actually collecting this type of data? When it comes to other aspects, we need to understand where the data is coming from. So is this online data or offline data? If it is offline data, how did we manage to convert it online? And those are the kind of key questions that we need to be definitely asking. When it comes to how the segments are being constructed, I think the key here is to ask if the data has been modeled. Because if the data is being modeled, we need to be asking questions such as what is the seed size, or how effective are these audiences, and what is the precision level of these audiences, because that will really deliver out what kind of campaigns and precision you will be delivering for your activations. The other things that we need to understand is what is the recency, frequency, as well as how often these providers refreshing their data, or what is the look back window. And when it comes to the last part of what we should be asking is definitely all around the scale of the segment. So if you have a regional client, we need to understand the unique count per market or per region that the client wants to run across. And of course, is this data going to be device-led, web-based? Is this cross-device? So all of these questions are very important when it comes to actually using these type of data points. But most importantly, I do believe that buyers of this data have the right to demand the level of transparency, because that will really help you to then impact the quality of the type of data that you are going to be receiving from the data providers.
Yeah, absolutely. You've raised a lot of really great points there. I think the first one being the fact that quality will mean different things to different advertisers. So whether or not you're, it could be a gambling company through to a luxury company trying to find high net worth individuals, the output will be very, very similar, but the data you need to use will be quite different in its origin and where it comes from.
Absolutely.
You touched on something which I'd just like to, I suppose, clarify. You mentioned model data, and this is something which comes up quite often, but I think is not quite understood. So are you able to just expand on exactly what that is?
So by model data means that the data provider is taking a seed, and then within their own insights or DMPs, they're modeling the data to scale it out. Lotame doesn't use that type of data. We only use it for our agent and our precision audiences, and then we score against the Nielsen DAR segments. But when it comes to the model data, it's very important that you have full transparency as to where the seed comes from, the scale of the seed. So model data is basically used within the insights of, or built within the insights of the providers.
Yeah, because sometimes we see that there are segments coming over and it's an unusually large size, for example. So for business travelers in Singapore, and there's 5 million of them, which is obviously near the population size of the whole of Singapore. So it can't really be the case. And that's when I think the main questions come up. So where does this come from? What is the quality of this data? So it's interesting points to touch on. And then I suppose, Dom, if I can switch over to you and think about, obviously from a brand's point of view, you've worked a lot with brands in terms of first-party data, and these are discussions which we have every day. From your point of view, what do you feel makes first-party data good quality? Is all first-party data good quality?
Yeah, so I think the points that Zuzanna's raised there around transparency and source, those elements don't really necessarily come in to play when we're talking about first-party data as much, because the source is often, is their own method of collection, and transparency there is therefore they know where the data has come from, and they know that source. So the elements to quality first-party data are more deterministic around, the attributes that might be associated with the data that they've collected, things like products that have been purchased, or for automotive, maybe a model of vehicle that has been signed up to a test drive. So I think you're in first-party data, you're getting more into like the granularity of the individual attributes that make up that data, as opposed to necessarily maybe the overall scale. We're always talking about this balance between scale and accuracy And first-party data is definitely the smaller pool of data, but is what we say is much more accurate because it's known data. It's data that's measured from a first-party source where an advertiser has determined that they want to find people who have performed a certain action, whereas the reason we look at second and third party data sources is to complement that first party data narrative in our marketing, to try to extend that scale out to ensure that we're able to target new prospects. So I think from an accuracy point of view for first party data, the conversation slightly flips, as the source is already known. It's all about kind of segmenting that data out into different areas so that we're able to treat the data in slightly different ways.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And obviously what we've been talking about a lot in terms of M-Insights and the usage of that data as well. From Low2Me's perspective, does that stand true, Susanna? Are you aligned with what that means?
I think I definitely agree with Dom. I think the other thing I would like to point out here is that from our point of view, the same rules should apply to first, second, or third party data. So I think it's very important that you are working with a trusted partner on the first party data front. But of course, one thing that we all need to adhere to, and that is including the first party data, is the data is being collected in a privacy compliant way. So I think that's going to be also very important. And of course, when it comes to collecting data and then activating on the data, you still need to have that transparency as to how you are building the first, the segment from the first party data as well before you activate it. So it's very important that you kind of join these three together when you're thinking about what quality means, because it should be the same for every single data point, not just for the first party data.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, actually, and something which is probably not picked up on by ourselves in the agencies and also advertisers as well. Third-party data naturally is generally used when you don't have as much first-party data, or if you don't have any at all. But as a result, there is a feeling that you don't have to have all the same standards, one might say, when it comes to that data, because you don't expect the same results from it. We always talk about first-party data being the very best, as Dom's just said. I think applying the same standards to them is definitely really, really important. Again, as you said, from a governance point of view, and we touched on that in session 1, and then in the next session, in session 3, we'll be talking about the ethical use of data as well. So going beyond that legal standpoint, looking at how to use data ethically, and just because you have it doesn't mean to say you should. So having that transparency there and making sure that users are aware of what's happening and how you're using their data is really important, and applying the same standards there. So talking about data collection and having those same standards, it'd be good or very interesting to hear more about how it's collected. We've had a lot of discussion about this from the identity sessions, and there is obviously consent management which needs to take place. So making sure that users are aware that their data is being collected and that they give their consent, and that there's a value exchange both ways. So moving forwards as an industry, we can make sure that users feel as though their data is being used constructively and they benefit from it, and the internet can hopefully remain a free area for them. So Susanna, can you just talk a little bit more about that data collection process? And I suppose, again, from Low2Me's perspective, what's important there? What are the key watch out factors?
Of course. I think when we look at data collection methodologies or just how is quality data collected, I think there are a couple of key things that the agencies or clients need to bear in mind when they're selecting the right partner. So first one is they need to be selecting a trusted partner, so somebody that they trust. And secondly, they need to make sure that this trusted partner is collecting data in a privacy compliant way. So it's aligned with all the different rules and regulations in different types of markets within APAC, EMEA, globally. So let's say GDPR, for example. But I think the most important thing is here for the agencies to ask some really hard questions when they're selecting these trusted partners. So some of the questions they should be asking is, does your partner have the right to collect every single piece of consumer data that they're actually using for activations? The other question is asking, if they are, then are they actually providing consumers with easy and very transparent way to opt out if needed? I think it's very important to also ensure that when you are selecting a partner for these type of services, is the fact that the partner needs to be compliant across all the different regions that either the agencies or client is being active across. So it's the data compliance or the privacy compliance is very important. So it's not just in Singapore, it needs to be compliant in all the other markets as well. And lastly, I think you need to be looking at partners who are really planning for the future. So how extensible is their privacy solutions, and can they actually adhere to the regulations that are yet to come in different markets within, let's say, APAC? So those are some of the hard questions that need to be asked before data is being collected and some of the suppliers have been selected.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I think privacy comes up so often. There's some research which we did at Group M, which suggests that the majority of users are deeply concerned about privacy, and in fact, they don't really see that value exchange. Then they don't feel as if that when their data is being used for advertising, that it's actually any better for them. So it's that obviously raises the point that making sure you have the right partnerships in place is extremely important here. We do need to remember that a lot of advertisers, they don't have lots of first-party data, so they don't have what we would deem to be the richest source of data. And so there are many cases where they have to go and find other forms of targeting and other forms of data in order to do that, which brings us nicely onto the next topic, which is partnerships. And I think, Susanna, you've mentioned a number of points already, which I think speaks to this in terms of what's the best way to pick a data partner. If you're a brand, then what should you be asking, or what are the main elements to look out for? Tom from the trade desk, he discussed interconnectivity, making sure that brands work with partners where they're happy and are able to work with the tech platforms or marketing technologies which are in place for them. And again, making sure there isn't too many silos in place, making sure that interconnectivity exists and you do have the most unified view of data, stroke a user possible. Does that speak true to you?
Yes, absolutely. So interconnectivity is the key. However, I think I need to kind of bring it back to the point where I mentioned a little bit earlier on, saying that the definition of quality data varies. So I think it's very important before any partner is selected for the agency or client is to sit down and really create their own data quality playbook and really kind of write down what does it mean data quality to them, what are the criteria, objectives and goals they're trying to achieve. And based on that, they'll be able to then select the right partner. So I think having the data quality playbook is going to be a key before kind of selecting the right partners, but interconnectivity is absolutely key for sure. Yeah,
perfect. And then Dom, from your point of view, I think you've been quite involved in this, obviously from Group M side of things, looking at partnerships, analyzing them, and also I think you're building some tools as well to help do this. Can you just talk through, first of all, what they are and give us a quick explanation perhaps, but then also what do we look for from a partnership?
Yeah, absolutely. So as Susanna's mentioned, there's a bit of a process that goes into an evaluation, not just in terms of from a client and agency side of what do I need my campaign to achieve, what are the objectives, but even before you get to that stage, we want to make sure that we're working with vendors and partners at Group M who have the same level of diligence and governance that we hold within our company values. So part of that process is, going through an extensive RFI, is going through an extensive privacy governance review as well, which I'm sure has been mentioned in other discussions here. So as part of that, we've just finished building and are releasing in the next couple of weeks a global standardized RFI tool web application. At the moment, it's a very fragmented process where different people in different markets, different agencies could potentially be talking to the same vendors and asking them different questions, but it overlaps in some ways, and it's not good practice from us. It's not good practice for the vendor or partner that we're working with. That duplicates their work, it duplicates our work. So as part of that, we are engaging in a process to standardize that practice, which will be of real significant value to our partners, but also to our agency staff as well, to ensure that they're able to get answers on different partners in a timely manner. But going into that in a kind of like a bit more detail, knowing what your objective is paramount in deciding what partner you might want to be using. You know, if your objective is reach, then you're going to need to be using a partner who has significant scale in a market, and maybe a survey provider who only surveys a few hundred people is not obviously going to be of too much benefit to you. So there's a whole host of different kind of processes and evaluation techniques, not just scale, but you know, the methodology of collection. So is the data deterministic or is it probabilistic? Is it collected by SDK? Is it collected by Bidstream? These different elements kind of build up a picture of whether or not one provider is slightly better in terms of your use case than another. And it's not to say that there's an empirical ranking of one vendor is good and one vendor is bad, not at all. They will differ depending on the use case that that we have as part of our campaigns.
Yeah, and I think you raised some good points there, really around the fragmentation as well. Obviously, we have a lot of regional clients, many of whom have offices in different locations, and they may well find that they're speaking to the same vendors or different offices of those vendors, and obviously looking at different rates just in the same way we may do. So I think there is a very good opportunity that we can obviously advise them and make sure that they're on the right path in terms of choosing the right partner. Obviously, you know, talking back to quality, as you rightly said, Susanna, as well, and then looking at exactly how that data is collected. That partnership piece is interesting for us, obviously, as an agency group. It was suggested again in the identity sessions that there is a real opportunity for us to be trusted advisors here. We work so closely with the agencies, sorry, not with the agencies, with our clients. And as a result, we should take advantage of that and make sure that we can help them as much as possible in terms of what can they do around data, if it's first, second, third party data. So Susanna, from your point of view, how do you think agencies can best support clients in this area around creating data collection and partnership strategies? This is something that we're asked so often in terms of, you know, I've heard that there are so many changes coming. I know I need to collect more first party data. I have no idea what to do. Do I need to get loads of technology on board? Do I need to spend lots of money?
So this is a really good question. So yes, we have been asked this many times. And I mean, this has been a hot topic question for the past, I'd say probably about 8 months now. So what we have done as a company, we have actually created our own data quality playbook that we are now giving to the clients and agencies as a good starting point that they can use to then really build out on clients' unique audience quality, well, data quality playbooks. So I think it's really important, as Dom mentioned, for the agency groups to really understand, you know, what the providers are out there in the ecosystem and what type of data they can support your clients with. But I think having the kind of really customized solution per client, especially the regional client, is going to be a key. So I think customized data quality playbook is going to be very important moving forward. But as Dom mentioned, you will have all the information then to really use it, to customize it.
Yeah, definitely something which we can use, and certainly something which our clients would find very, very useful. On that note, I think Dom, I'd try and throw a spanner in the works. And we've discussed first party, second party, third party data. And Susanna, you raised a great point in that we should have the same standards when we're looking at all of them. So some clients, they don't have any first party data because they don't really have large sites, or they have very little of it, whereas other clients have huge amounts of it. With this in mind, is it necessary to have balance? Is it necessary to even have first party data? So how important is it to have that one-to-one conversation with consumers? Is it worth the effort of spending money and bringing this technology on board, or can we do what is necessary using second or third party data?
Well, I think the vast majority of the time, second and third party data is used to supplement what we can do with first party data. Obviously, we can't create first party data if there isn't already any method of collecting it. For clients that don't have first party data, I mean, for example, a lot of FMCG clients currently don't have many sources of online portals where you can purchase their products. And if they do, it's actually through a third party anyway. So, you know, there is a whole host of different advertisers that we work with that don't have a great deal of first party data. But the whole point of that, of, you know, the second and third party data that we're talking about is to help fill in those gaps. Now, would someone argue that data that says an individual has purchased a product from a website versus a third-party survey where someone has stated that they have also purchased the same product in the last 30 days. One may be seen to be better than the other, but only because there may be an inherent bias in the answer that someone's given. But realistically, they're both telling you the same piece of information. So there are other sources out there to get this level of information. So I don't necessarily think that it's all doom and gloom if you don't have first-party data collected. We're also talking, a lot about the method of collecting this data online. First-party data collection online is potentially going to become more difficult in the months to come. A lot of first-party data is collected through third-party platforms such as Pixels, etc. And so there may actually be more heavily reliant on offline first-party data sources and using onboarding platforms to be able to use that data online, which will be an interesting shift because historically first-party data, or the process of onboarding first-party data from an offline source to an online presence has been seen as a secondary process to just online data collection. So it'll be really interesting to see how that becomes potentially more prevalent in the months to come with the technology changes that we're expecting.
Yeah, and obviously the changing ways in which data is being collected throw up even more need for the fact that there should be data governance and those ethical processes in place as well, which is pertinent given that's the topic of this series at the moment. But you raised a couple of points there, which I think are worth touching on again. And one of them was data bias, so inherent bias in terms of the way someone might answer a question. And you've also obviously mentioned that the way in which data is collected is becoming more complicated. So this does obviously affect how it's collected, where it's collected, who's collecting it as well. When we look at all those factors, do you see that perhaps it's going to reduce the quality of data moving forwards? The partners that we work with and that you've been having conversations with, do you find that there is a risk to using data in future and as a result more people are using first-party data? What's your take on this?
To be honest, we've been using survey-based data to fuel media planning for decades, and that has worked for us for various different media channels. The idea that first-party data collected online is potentially better is probably down to who you're asking, or even potentially down to the advertiser we're collecting it for. The simplicity of collecting the data and the cost of collecting the data is obviously lower when collecting it through your own website or own app or something like that. But we are not going to turn off the taps to collecting data via other means, via panels and questionnaires, etc., because that qualitative data set is far more rich in some aspects than the quantitative data that we get just by measuring the number of people who come onto a website. The elements of being able to dive into the qual data to understand extra factors and attributes about those individuals that make those individuals who they are is almost as valuable as the potential bias risk. So I think each data set has its own true value, and I don't think that just the method of collection is reason to dismiss one over another.
Perfect. Yeah, I think that obviously leads very nicely into, I suppose, the conclusion of this, and we've talked about a lot of points here. Zuzana, I think your points around data quality and the fact that there should be a single standard across all types of data, and we shouldn't look at them separately. That's one of the most interesting here. The conversations often come up and they're very, very separate, but the takeout I'm getting is that, in fact, we should be looking at all of these types of data in the same way, but just having a balance or finding a way to get that balance between the different types of data. And again, that playbook and auditing and what's available and really where the data comes from is so important. So as a closing remark, I'd ask you both, is there anything we've missed? Anything from either Dom, your side, or Susanna, your side, that we think we've missed out of this conversation that would be useful for clients or agencies?
I think, from a data perspective, it's not necessarily anything that we've missed, but it's more of a maybe a piece of advice. As we kind of touched on, there are many technology changes that are happening, and a lot of clients are asking our agencies, like, what can we do and how can we be best prepared? A lot of things are going to change over the next few months. So we're not in a position today where we can say, right, identity looks like this 100%. But I think the advice that I would give is to prepare as best you can all of the answers to questions that will come up inevitably in the future. So by that, I mean, auditing first-party data collection, both offline and online, auditing usage of third-party data, what kinds of data is being used at the moment, both in terms of insight and also in terms of activation. What are those data sources? What are potential sources that may be coming under threat in the future as well? So prepare yourself for data usage for 2022 as early as possible.
I think from my point of view would be also looking out for partners who are within the identity space and who are interoperable with other ID solutions out there. And I know that that's something that GroupM is already looking into and is really driving. So I think it's really important for both the agencies and the clients to look out for partners who can be interoperable post 2022 as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually really enjoyed the training session from yourselves last Monday. So we'll be keeping a close eye on the Lotomy solutions. It's such a hot space right now, and there's so much news about it all the time. So the more information we can get on them, the better. So with that, I'll say thank you so much. This has been really, really interesting. We've covered a lot. I think obviously, the need for governance, the need for that transparency within data, and the need also to have an open mind around what type of data is being used. And as you said, Susanna, applying that same standard across all parts of it are the key takeouts for me. The next session, we're going to be talking about data ethics. And as we touched on a bit earlier, it's around whether or not, even if you have data, should you be using it? So again, making sure the user feels like there's a value exchange and their data is being used responsibly and also for their benefit at the same time. So please stay tuned for that. We'll keep you updated. If you have any questions, or as always, please get in touch with the client dev team and Dom Benton directly.